Thank you so much for joining me today as we travel through the book of Ruth, chapter 4. And we've gone through chapters 1, 2, and 3 in prior weeks. Those videos are up on our YouTube page under the playlist series. So if you've missed out and you want to catch up, I challenge you to go back and watch Ruth 1, 2, and 3. Well, if you don't know me, my name is Chris Hamilton. I'm the Director of Student Ministries over at Trinity Evangelical Presbyterian Church. Yes, that is a lot to say, and I say it every single time, but it rings true right now. I am one of 8 kids. I was adopted at a young age of 20 months. And I was adopted with my older brother and sister. And so my sister was 7 and my brother was 6. But growing up, I lived with this idea of what if? What if things were different? What if I never had to leave my biological parents? What if everything that I knew right now was not the reality that I live with today? And unfortunately, that question shaped a lot of the wrong decisions in my life. For instance, I went through my teenage years just really resenting my parents for taking me away from that life. Even though I was so young, I was 20 months old when I was adopted, I still resented my parents for taking me away from that experience. And in fact, it brought me to the point of making some poor decisions, which resulted in me getting kicked out of my house and living with other kids that had broken families and living that experience through them. And I think God was trying to teach me a lesson during that time that His plan is better than any what if I could ever imagine. So I want to look at the book of Ruth in chapter 4 specifically through a different lens than we've been looking at prior through the first 3 chapters. So we can see in the beginning, we talked about Ruth having bold loyalty. So Ruth was very loyal to Naomi in the sense that she left everything that she knew to follow Naomi to a place that she knew nothing about. In fact, in chapter 2, we even see that Naomi changes her name to Mara, and I think it's chapter 2. If it's not, it's the end of chapter 1. But Naomi changes her name to Mara, which means bitter. And so we see the circumstance that filled Naomi's life. She lost her husband and 2 sons and everything that she knew. She had no guardian redeemers over in Moab, and we didn't even know of the guardian redeemers until like chapter 3. But she's over there and she's just miserable. She blames God and she's in her feels. She has all these emotions about her situation, what's going on. And Ruth then has to be willing to do certain things. So we see that Ruth is willing to work, she's willing to withstand, and she's willing to wait. So she's willing to work through those circumstances, to follow Naomi to where she was going back in Bethlehem, to withstand the culture that she knew nothing about and she really didn't fit in. There was oppression between the Ephrathites and the Moabites, and then she was willing to wait out throughout the whole process. And then in chapter 3, we see a few things that Ruth had to endure and she had to embrace to get to that next step. So we see Ruth had to believe in Naomi's instruction. And not only that, she had to obey the instruction that was given to her, take action in that, and have zeal upon waiting for the promise that Boaz gave her. Now we come to Boaz. And at this point, Boaz says, hey, listen, I want to redeem you, Ruth. I really do. There is just one person ahead of me that has that right before I do. And this is where we jump into Ruth chapter 4. So I'm just going to read as fast as I can through this while trying to make sense of the text, okay? Meanwhile, Boaz went up to the town gate and sat down there just as the guardian redeemer he had mentioned came along. Boaz said, come over here, my friend, and sit down. So he went over and sat down. Boaz took 10 of the elders of the town and said, sit here, and they did so. Then he said to the guardian redeemer, Naomi, who's come back from Moab, is selling the piece of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. I thought I should bring the matter to your attention and suggest that you buy it in the presence of these seated here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, do so. But if you will not, tell me, so I will know. For no one has the right to do it except you, and I am next in line. I will redeem it, he said. Then Boaz said, on the day you buy the land from Naomi, you also acquire Ruth the Moabite, the dead man's widow, in order to maintain the name of the dead, which is with this property. At this, the guardian redeemer said, then I cannot redeem it because I might endanger my own estate. You redeem it yourself. I can't do it. Now, in earlier times in Israel, for the redemption and the transfer of property to become final, one party took off his sandal and gave it to the other. This was the method of legalizing transactions in Israel. So the guardian redeemer said to Boaz, buy it yourself. And he removed his sandal. Then Boaz announced to the elders and all the people, today you are all witnesses that I have bought from Naomi and all the property of Elimelech, Chilion, and Mahlon. I have also acquired Ruth the Moabite, Mahlon's widow, as my wife, in order to maintain the name of the dead with this property, so that his name will not disappear from among his family or from his hometown. Today you are my witnesses. Then the elders and all the people at the gate said, we are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your home like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the family of Israel. May you have standing in Ephrathah and be famous in Bethlehem through the offspring the Lord gives you by this young woman. May your family be that of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah. So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. When he made love to her, the Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son. The women said to Naomi, praise be to the Lord, who this day has not left you without a guardian redeemer. May he become famous throughout Israel. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you and who is better to you than 7 sons, has given him birth. Then Naomi took the child in her arms and cared for him. The women living there said, Naomi has a son, and they named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. Now, this is such a beautiful depiction of redemption, how Naomi suffered through all that bitterness, had all that hardship in her life, lost all the men in her life just to be followed by Ruth. And the friendship and loyalty of Ruth gave much warmth and much promise to Naomi, I'm sure, but never to the point of thinking it would end up like this. So the situation that they were both going through, I'm sure they both had experiences where they both questioned the what ifs in life. What if my son had never died? What if my husband had never died? Same thing with Ruth. What if my husband had never died? What if we never had to leave Moab? What if I could stay with my people? But it's bold faith and it's bold loyalty that we see that changes the script. It changes the trajectory of our own path. Because as we draw closer to Christ and as we trust Him, He paints us a more clear picture. See, from the outside looking in, we can see everything in this passage. We can see how the brokenness turns to restoration. We can see how redemption is brought forth. But when you don't have the book in front of you and you're trying to live life and just figure out things like questions like, who am I? Why am I here? What purpose does it bring? What if my life looked different than it does right now? See, these are valuable questions that we instill in our own minds, but we don't focus them correctly. Instead of asking, what if my life were different, we should ask, what if God had different plans for me? So going through this lesson, I think there's a lot of different things that we can see, but I want to challenge us just for a moment to take a step back and look through the lens of the other guardian redeemer. See, the other guardian redeemer, he maybe said no because he had other situations. At first, it looked promising. So Naomi is selling the land of Elimelech. Sure, it will strengthen my portfolio. It will strengthen the inheritance that I can give maybe to the family that I have currently. So it's a worthwhile inheritance. But as soon as it's attached to the story of brokenness, as soon as it's attached to something maybe that makes him give up something he might already have. And so we don't know the full story of the other guardian redeemer. We can try to paint a picture. We can try to make it clear. The other guardian redeemer, he could have already been married, and most of his finances, maybe he wasn't as wealthy as Boaz, but most of his finances went to his family. And so taking on Ruth and Naomi, maybe it was more of a financial burden. So maybe it became a burden. Maybe he was worried about Ruth being a Moabite and it jeopardizing his standing or jeopardizing his reputation. And so if this were the case, he would have said, hey, I want the land, but I don't want what comes with the land. I think no matter what the reason, there was a sacrifice that this guardian redeemer wasn't willing to make. But Boaz, on the other hand, he saw the noble character of Ruth. He cared for Ruth. And he took action. And he went in a direction of saying, you know what? I will. I won't only redeem the land and buy the land, but I will also redeem Ruth and carry on the name of Elimelech. And that also means taking care of Naomi. So as we think through this and we look through the different lens, and we can look at the other way too with the redemption story. I think that's a great way to look at the book of Ruth. But no matter how we look at it, we have to ask ourselves, am I asking God, what if? Or am I letting God ask me, what if I had other plans to me? When we get to a point to understand our ways aren't better than His ways, and we put our trust in Jesus Christ, not only as our Lord and Savior, but also the author of our lives, we can then understand everything that He has for us is always going to be better than what we could ever plan for ourselves. I hope this message encourages you, and I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your week. Thank you, and God bless.